How to get started collecting 78 RPM records, where to find them, and what to look for. A beginner's guide to collecting 78 RPM records, that is what's coming up next. Hello, vinyl community, music lovers, 78ers, shellac spinners of shellac, I don't know. Whoever, anyone who just happened to stumble upon this video, welcome. Welcome to Tone and Grooves. My name is Jeff, and this is going to be a basically an introduction to how to collect 78 RPM records, how to, kind of a beginner's guide, if you will, to getting into the hobby of collecting 78 RPM shellac records. It's something I've been thinking about doing for a while. I mean, way back when COVID started and I had a little more time on my hands, and when I had my little home studio, if you will, set up with the turntable and the mixer and everything, and was first getting into shellac stack listening sessions and whatnot. It was something that I thought, I should do a little video on, how to collect 78 RPM records, how to get into that. So I've been thinking about doing this for a while, and here recently a viewer posed a question in a message on one of my 78 videos, and just asked, basically said, think about getting into collecting 78s and wondering, kind of where to find some, where to get some, is there good places online to go to buy 78s, things like that. And shout out to Bill at the Vinyl Verse. Bill at the Vinyl Verse posed the question. If you don't know Bill's channel, the Vinyl Verse, check it out. Bill is a longtime VCer and one of the nicest, kindest guys in the VC. Great channel, so check that out. I'll put a link down below. Yeah, just thought I would, just kind of based on my own experience, that's the caveat with this, or the, the heads up, the footnote, if you will. I'm not necessarily an expert in 78s, but I've been doing it, collecting 78s for at least 10 years now, 10, 12 years. So just kind of based on my own experience, things that I've learned along the way, mistakes that I've made, whatnot, just thought I would do this video to answer the question to start out. Where do you get 78s? Where's a good place to go? I'll answer that, and then thought, okay, so if you know where to go, the next thing is what to look for, right? I mean, what to look for and what to be on the lookout for, things to be aware of, things like that. So that's going to be the two parts of this video. Maybe there'll be more videos, because there's just so much detail that one could dive into in this hobby. So, but going to tackle those two questions, where to get 78s, where to find them, and then kind of some general ideas on what to look for when you're hunting 78s. So where to look for them? Bill asked the question, are there good places online? Yeah, there are. He asked specifically about eBay. For the most part, I tend to stay away from eBay. I find on eBay, when it comes to 78s especially, oftentimes it's not people who specialize in 78s and who really know what they're doing or what they have, and so that tends to be oftentimes, especially now. I mean, when I first started collecting 78s, it was a little bit different. You could find some really good bargains sometimes on eBay, but now it just seems like prices have really gone up, especially on eBay. And you seem to have a lot of sellers who are, selling estates or are, they're not just they're not specialists in 78 records or records in general. They're just kind of selling, various things, antiques and whatnot, and within there, then they've got some 78s. And so the problem there is that 78s are extremely fragile, brittle. Someone described shipping 78s in the mail like trying to ship a graham cracker. And if you can ship a graham cracker without it cracking and breaking or crumbling in the mail, then you can ship 78s. But it's that difficult. So I hear a lot of horror stories about people who have bought 78s on eBay from sellers who were inexperienced, did not package them well, and they ended up, cracked, broken, chipped, shattered in some cases. So I tend to stay away from eBay. There are some great places online. There's a website called V as in Victor, M Auctions. I'll put the link down below. That's a website specifically for selling and buying 78 RPM records. Great site, and you can get some good bargains there, as well as some rarities and whatnot. And they do a combination of they have an auction going, I think, every month, so you can bid on items, and then they also have records that are just a set sale that are just in, and it's various sellers who are selling on the one site. So that's one place online. There's also a number of Facebook groups and that do buying and selling of 78 records. So that's a good place to go, because there you're dealing with fellow collectors who are, selling off things from their collection or whatnot. So they know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing for the most part. So that's a resource. There's also Kurt Nauck, Nauck. Kurt Nauck is a well-known and well-respected expert in 78 records, and he runs an auction, I think like maybe quarterly, 4 times a year, something like that, maybe more. In fact, I just got an email, I think last week, saying that the newest auction has started. So Kurt Nauck, I don't remember the website. I'll post it down below. But that's also a good place if you want to, bid on some records. And he very often has like very rare things. And he'll do like special sections within an auction where he calls, where it's the gem section. So, 78s that are in like just phenomenally fantastic condition, gems. And so it's, it can be a great place to get some 78 RPM records. It's mostly kind of more rare things, although you can sometimes find common, records. And then on the website, just a little heads up, he also will then, anything that doesn't sell in the auction, he'll make available for sale at a set price after the auction is over. So that becomes a way that you can kind of pick up some things, just buying them straight out without bidding. So there's a couple of resources online. Personally, I think the best way to, if you're not looking for something specific, if you just want to go, hunt for 78 records and see what you can find, which is super fun, in my opinion, that's the best way to do it. I think that's the most fun way to do it. And in my experience, I found there's a number of ways or places to look. Antique stores will oftentimes have 78 RPM records. Junk shops, and what I mean by junk shop, places along the highway, backcountry roads, places out in the middle of nowhere that are, or in towns, that just are kind of like, they may call themselves antique stores, but they're kind of like junk shops or thrift stores, that type of thing. Thrift stores will often have 78 RPM records, although in my experience, Goodwill very rarely has 78 RPM records, but other kind of, locally owned, privately owned, if you will, thrift shops will often have 78 RPM records. I'm not sure why that is, but in my neck of the woods, that's the way it tends to go. Antique stores, in my experience, tend to be on one end of two extremes. On the cheap end, oftentimes, in my experience, antique stores will have a bunch of 78s, and they're just like everything's the same price. Maybe $1 or $2 a piece, something like that. Then you usually have the opposite extreme, antique stores where they think that these are super rare items that then need to be priced accordingly, and so they'll have a few 78s, priced at, overpriced, $10 a piece or something ridiculous like that. In my experience, that tends to be the case with antique stores. Junk shops oftentimes are some of the best places to find 78s, and like we've got a junk shop here in the area where, the gentleman who owns it, he's buying out estates, just like buying an entire house of goods and items, and then he's selling those items in his junk shop. And he has a whole section. I've done a video on it. You've seen video probably. So he's got a whole section that's just records. 10 minutes into this, and this is as far as we've got. But I think hopefully this is good information. Record stores can also be a place to find 78s. Although my advice there is, anytime you go into a record store, if you're looking for 78s, ask, do you have any 78 RPM records? Because I've found that most vinyl record stores don't have 78s out on the sales floor, but they oftentimes do have 78s somewhere in the basement, in a closet somewhere, hidden away, in a box, under the shelves, because they're obviously buying up people's record collections, and oftentimes then they're acquiring 78 records, but I find that most record store owners, they don't know 78s, they don't know what to do with them, they don't know how to price them, they don't really know what they have. And so oftentimes in my experience, they have them, but they're hidden away somewhere because they just don't know what to do with them. In my experience there too, then, I found that you kind of have one of two extremes, usually because those record store owners don't know what they're dealing with or don't know what they have. They're either just willing to sell them off, $1 a piece or something like that, or they want to look at them when you bring them to the counter and then try to look them up online on eBay or something like that and try to get some kind of an idea of what they're worth and then base their price on that, which is super frustrating. So I encourage you, if you go to a record store and you ask, do you have any 78 records? And they say, yes, we do. We've got, a couple boxes, or we got a bunch down in the basement or whatever. Then ask before you start browsing, do you have a set price on these, or are they priced individually, or how's the pricing going to work, so that you don't end up with 25 records that you think you're going to get for $25, and you get up to the counter and suddenly they want whatever, $50 a piece or some crazy ridiculous price like that. So those are kind of some of the best ways. When you're looking at antique stores, junk shops and whatnot, be sure to look low. 78 RPM, what I mean by that is look down on the floor a lot, because 78 RPM records are heavy, and so usually if an antique store or a junk shop has a bunch of 78s, they're going to be on the floor, they're going to be low. So always make sure to check the floor area, not just what's on the shelves. So there's, probably the top places where I find the 78s. I don't do a lot of garage sailing, so that could be a way, but I have found 78s in, estate sales. So that's another way, because there again, you've got an entire household that's being sold off. And if there was 78s in there, obviously they're going to be there. So that's another way. Those are probably the best places to find them in the wild and online. What are you finding? What are you coming across? How do you know what you're getting into, what you're looking at? Great to know where to find these records, but good to go into that situation armed with some knowledge, so that you know what you're looking at, what you're looking for, so that you know what you're taking home. So that's what I thought I would kind of spend a little bit of time on here, and just kind of, again, based on my experience, because I know when I got into 78 RPM records, I was just buying up any 78s that I could find, because I just was just, just dove in head first, if you will. And then I ended up with a lot of stuff that that was, maybe kind of cool, and in great condition and whatnot, but the music was not really to my liking. So I learned then how to kind of narrow that down, how to zero in on the things that I really like more. So I would say going into that, there's really kind of when it comes to 78s, I mean, we're talking about records that have, been around in some cases for well over 100 years. So you've got, well over 100 years worth of records and music. So within that, there's a lot of different types of styles, a lot of different record labels. And within that, there's kind of two very broad categories of recordings. You've got the early ones, which are acoustic recordings, and then you've got what you might say is the later ones that are electrical recordings. So, because 1925 becomes kind of the dividing line, if you will, and so everything before 1925 was acoustically recorded, meaning it was done without electricity. The band or the singer was just playing or singing into a horn, literally, that then acoustically, brought that sound wave to a recording device and put that into disc. That sounds very different from what we know today. Obviously, so that's a totally different sound. So now there's great, fantastic music in that acoustic era, but it's just something to kind of be aware of. If you really don't like that, what many people describe as a tinny sound, if you don't like that, then you probably want to stay away from acoustically recorded records and stick with electric. So that becomes just kind of a heads up, and I'm gonna give you some clues on how to identify, records from acoustic versus electric eras. Let's see. 25 is not like a firm, dividing line. Early 1925 is when the big recording companies like Columbia and RCA started electrical recording. It wasn't until towards the end of 1925 that they were fully electric. So you've got some crossover there in 1925, where you've got a mix of records that are acoustic and records that are electrical, and I'll give you a heads up on how to identify that as well. Okay, so let's dive in. What you're going to find, especially if you're hunting in the wild, you're going to find a lot of Columbia, and you're going to find a lot of Victor or RCA Victor. This is a very common Columbia label that you're going to run across. It's this blue with the gold band, what's referred to as the magic notes. You've got the notes up here in the logo there. These are going to be acoustic recordings. So these are definitely going to be acoustic recordings. What's helpful then too in identifying what kind of music is going to be on here, these early labels have a description in there, like this says dance music. So that's going to be 1920s, 19-teens dance music. Some of it's going to be jazzy. So you've got a chance there that you're going to have more of a jazzy type record, but some of it's just going to be straight up 1920s, dance band music. So that's a general idea. Okay, it's acoustic. Do I like acoustic recorded records? Yes, I love them, and I like 1920s dance music. So I know this is going to be in my wheelhouse, and I've come to learn over the years that Art Hickman. I enjoy Art Hickman. And so this is a record I'm going to pick up, especially if it's for $1. This is a later Columbia. You're going to see a lot of these red Columbia labels. These are electric, obviously. These are from the 30s and 40s and into the 50s. So if it's a red, it's electric. It's from the later years. And then, of course, even on the red, you're going to have all kinds of different genres. You're going to have big band, you're going to have country western, you're going to have just crooners, and everything in between. Unfortunately, they did away with the little descriptive. So there's nothing on here that says dance band or anything genre that's going to give you a clue. So here you kind of have to know a little bit more about artists and, you know, that kind of a deal. Obviously, this is a Harry James record, so it's going to be big band. Columbia was one of the big labels. Victor obviously was the other kind of major power player, if you will, in the record industry in those days. So you're going to see a lot of Victor records. This is what's called the Batwing label. It's got these little wings here, if you will. These, for the most part, are acoustically recorded records. When you get into, there are some Batwings from the 1925 that are actually electrically recorded, but it doesn't say anywhere that it's electrically recorded, so there's where it gets a little bit confusing, but there is a way to discern that so you know what you're getting. But this is a Batwing. You're going to see a lot of these. These are from the teens and into the 20s, into like 1925. Same kind of a deal. You know, you've got your artist down here. Usually Victor does have some kind of a descriptor. This says Foxtrot. Again, a lot of these records will say, kind of give the musical style. Foxtrot, one step, waltz, rumba, etc., etc. Foxtrot, for the most part, is going to be more faster, more upbeat. Waltz is going to be slow. I learned right away that you know, avoid waltzes because I don't like the slow. You know, so I stay away from waltzes. Foxtrots are usually going to be more upbeat. It's going to be something in my wheelhouse. You know, obviously, you've got, you know, a little bit, you know, just the name of the artist or orchestra will oftentimes clue you in on what you can expect. Here you got Zez Confrey and his orchestra. You've got, then down below it says Zez Confrey at the piano. So obviously anything with like Clyde Durr and his orchestra is going to be some kind of a dance band or big band. So that'll help clue you in. Victor then, 1926, late 25, early, and then in 1926, they're all electric. They're going with then what's known as the Scroll label. And you've got up here the little VE that stands for Victor Electric, which becomes the way to identify Batwings that were actually recorded electrically. This is not going to be one, so I won't be able to give that example. But what you'll find is, if it's a Batwing that was electrically recorded, there's going to be this little symbol impressed in the dead wax area there. It's a VE in a circle. So if you find a Batwing that has VE in a circle up here in the dead wax or anywhere in the dead wax there, that tells you that it is an electrically recorded record, even though it has a Batwing label. So, but by 1926, Victor's gone to the Scroll label with this scroll workaround and the VE at the top, so that tells you that it's an electrically recorded record. And you're still going to have things like the, you know, Foxtrot and whatnot. And here you've got a little description. It says Gene Austin, and then it says tenor with orchestra and pipe organ. So that helps give you a little bit of clue of what that music is going to be like, help you get an idea of whether it's something that's going to be in your wheelhouse or not. Let's see here. Obviously, you're going to run across, you know, labels that you're familiar with because you know them from the vinyl era. So you're going to run across things like Decca. You're going to run across Capitol, Mercury, things like that. Those are more modern labels. They're electrically recorded. And so that's something like this. You're going to find things. Here's a Decca with the Anders sisters. Going to give you a little bit of a description. There's vocal with orchestra. And yeah, there's a Decca label. What else are you gonna find? Another common one that you're gonna see probably pretty regularly is Brunswick. Brunswick straddles the acoustic and the electric eras. This black label with the white, whatever you call that, kind of scroll work, and the gold scroll work is the earlier Brunswick label. So good chance that these are going to be acoustically recorded. I don't know that it's a magical kind of like, okay, after this point, you know, this Brunswick label is definitely electric. I'm honestly not that much of an expert with Brunswick, but I do know. Oh, that this label, this black with the gold, is the later Brunswick label. So like this one here is definitely an electrically recorded record. Again, you're gonna get the description on the Brunswick label. Like here you've got voice and guitar. It's Nick Lucas. Nick Lucas was an early kind of crooner and guitar player. Fantastic stuff. So, you'll get a little bit of a description here, so you know somewhat what to expect. Anything that's like tenor with orchestra, or baritone with orchestra, or tenor with piano, things like that is going to be more of a almost opera kind of style singing. Usually. When you get things like comedian or comedian, male and female, that gets to be kind of more fun, kind of music and style recording. So those are usually things that are going to be in my wheelhouse. Let's see, what else can we glean from that? Oh, I guess I would also, a little bit helpful there to kind of help you, figure out acoustic versus electrical, and a little bit about, like you could go into all kinds of detail there about different types of genres and whatnot and how to identify those, but that's just a little bit of basics that would help you kind of identify somewhat what you're looking for. Obviously, with your phone on you, as long as you're not out in the middle of nowhere, some junk shop where there's no cell phones reception, you can Google names of artists and kind of get an idea of what type of music they play. So that's always helpful. I would say too, just kind of what to look for in 78 RPM records. There's shellac, so you're gonna find damage that is unique to 78 records that we don't normally see with vinyl records. There's shellac, and they were played on the old style, wind-up machines with that heavy tone arm and steel, literally like a steel, it's like the steel needles are like a steel spike sticking out of that tone arm, riding on the grooves of the record. So that, caused damage to 78 records that's very unique to shellac and that you don't see on vinyl. So you're going to, see things like, watch out for groove wear. Groove wear will sometimes be very obvious because you had that big, heavy steel, that big steel needle with that heavy tone arm, just, grinding on that record time after time after time. So records that were well played on the old style Victrolas and whatnot are going to show, what they call graying of the grooves. Literally, the grooves will look gray. Because they're so worn. So that's something to look out for, because those records are not gonna sound good. That when that groove wear gets so bad sometimes that it overpowers the music, and you won't even be able to really have a good listening experience. You're gonna get things like needle digs and needle trails, where that steel needle is kind of either like poked a hole in it or kind of created a trail, a scratch that's kind of maybe circular or whatever, and you'll be able to see that and feel that with your fingernail. So those are things to look out for. Just like vinyl records, you can get surface scuffs and surface scratches that won't affect the play on the record. So that's oftentimes fine. Again, I mean, just like with vinyl, you use the same tricks. You know, can you feel it with your finger? Can you feel it with a fingernail? If you can feel it with your finger and feel it with your fingernail, the needle's going to feel it and pick it up as well. So those are kind of some things to be looking out for and aware of as far as, you know, condition and damage. Something else to look out for condition wise with 78s too is cracks. Shellac discs will sometimes crack, and so sometimes you'll get these like a tight crack where the disc is actually, you know, cracked open a little bit, but it's tight where the, you know, the two sides, if you will, are still like close together, and sometimes those are playable. But that's something to watch out for, is to look out for cracks, as well as sometimes you can see, if you look very carefully, you know, cracks beginning to form, almost like, you know, flaws in the shell of an egg, you know, if you will. You can see that kind of crack starting to form in the shellac on a 78, and so that's something to look out for as well. I also wanted to make sure I shared with you kind of my rule of thumb that I've learned the hard way over the years. Excellent condition doesn't guarantee excellent music. I learned very quickly that oftentimes a 78 that's in fantastic condition is not music that I am interested in listening to. And that makes sense if you think about it. You know, 78s that people loved, that they enjoyed, popular music, you know, very similar to vinyl. You know, if a record was popular and the person who owned it before you loved it, they played it to death. And if they played it to death on those old wind-up, you know, Victrola machines, they are worn out. So, you know, records that they had that they didn't really like very much, or that weren't really popular in the home, didn't get played, and so those often end up being the records that you find that are in fantastic condition. So it's not always a guarantee that because the record's in fantastic condition, the music's bad, but just a rule of thumb that I've learned to kind of go by. Excellent condition doesn't guarantee excellent music. I think that's all kind of all I got right now. I'm sure there's, like I said, this is just a kind of a basic introduction based on my experience. There's tons of detail that one could go into, and maybe I will over time. I don't know. We'll see. Take some deeper dives into different areas of collecting 78 RPM records, but that's just a basic guide where to look for them and what to be looking for. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Certainly feel free to drop questions or comments down below. Would love to hear from you and help in any way that I can. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking it out this long. And until next time, stay in the groove.